Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for waiting. So let's move to next session. Session 2, Circular Economy. Please welcome Mr. Müller, Governing Mayor of Berlin. Ms. Zammer from Durban. Mr. Gregoire, First Deputy Mayor of Paris. Dr. Gonzalez from Mexico City. And Mr. Koresawa, Director of Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, United Nations Human Settlement Program, who will act as the moderator of this session.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Ohayo gozaimasu. My name is Atsushi Koresawa. I work for United Nations Habitat Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. Our office is not in Tokyo, but in southern part of Japan. We are based in Japan. I'm very honored to be a moderator for this session. So, representing one of the UN agencies, UN Habitat, which works for better quality of life for all in urbanizing world. I'd like to start session by mentioning the most pressing global challenges of today. Be it plastic pollution. That was the theme of the World Environment Day last year. And UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres said, reject single-use plastic. Diffuse what you cannot reuse. Together, we can chart a path to a cleaner, greener world. The theme of World Environment Day this year is beat air pollution. That's another pressing issue, particularly in developing world. Most of these challenges are originated and happening in cities. Cities occupy only 2% of land area on the globe, but produce 70% of greenhouse gas and global waste. And as previous speaker already explained, the world is urbanizing very rapidly. Almost every year, 77 million people are added to urban population in the world. But cities are also source of innovation, therefore solutions. Battle for sustainability will be won or lost in cities. We need to speak up even clearer and louder to have our voices heard by G20 leaders. With that brief note, I'd like to immediately start off panel discussion on circular economy. We have 4 panelists, and we're going to have 2 rounds. I ask questions for first round, and I ask each panelist to speak. Then afterwards, we have a second round. So for first round, I have 3 questions. What is the most most pressing challenge your city is facing in general? And second question is also the most pressing issue your city is facing in relation to circular economy. And third question is, what is the major achievement or development or best practice until today your city has achieved? These are questions for first round. Then I'd like to start asking Mexico City to share your experience. And can we go, I'd like to go this way. So starting with Mexico City. Can you tell us about your city?
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of the challenges that we are facing in Mexico City. You heard we have very large questions for 5 minutes. So I will probably limit myself to list some of the issues that we are facing for you to understand some of the big problems that large cities like Mexico are facing. Mexico is one of the highest income cities within the country, Mexico being a high middle income country. In spite of that, we are still dealing with, or we're still struggling with high levels of poverty in the city. We are a city of 9 million people. In 2016, we estimated there is still 2.5 million people in poverty. We are struggling with low economic growth for a long period of time and very large inequalities within the city in all different aspects of social well-being. We are a city that is facing extreme water stress, with around 40% of resources that are lost, water resources that are lost due to a very old infrastructure for the distribution of water, and very serious problems of transportation. So as you can tell, we have major challenges, not only in terms of sustainability and the circular economy, but also basic development challenges. If we were to speak to the challenges, the specific challenges we have on the concept of circular economy, probably one of the largest one will be waste management and low rates of recycling of products. We generate in the city around 13,000 tons of solid waste a day, 1.3 kilograms per capita. But only 46% of those is separated, and we recover only around 4% of material that could have a value: plastic, glass, paper, products, and so on. We have around 500,000 tons of organic waste every year. We only recycle around 100,000 tons in compost. We have, on top of that, around more than 1,000 illegal dump sites, which are not accounted for in this kind of assessment. So you can see the huge challenge that we have to make sure that we have better recycling and better use of natural resources. In terms of mobility and air quality, every year the city has emissions of 2.5 tons per capita of CO2, which is pretty large. And around transportation, the transportation sector consumes something like 60% of the energy in the city, fuel-based energy. 95% of all emissions of CO2 are due to the consumption of fossil fuels. So here you have, air quality, a huge problem in the city. You probably saw in the newspapers last week, we had about 5 days of an environmental emergency due to high levels of pollution. We had to bring transportation to stop and reduce industrial activity in the city, which is very much focused on the transportation sector. We have large waste of food. Around 35% of food is wasted, and we have to find ways to recover that. Do you want me to leave the problems there so that we can come back perhaps to some of our thinking in terms of solutions? Or do you want me to go over some of those?
Maybe we can go to the next speaker. And thank you very much for sharing most of the challenges your city is facing. It's very common to many other rapidly urbanizing cities. Thank you very much. Can we ask Paris to share your experience and tell us about your city?
Yeah, thank you very much. First, I would like to thank Governor Kwoke for her invitation, and of course to thank all her team for the organization of this wonderful event. Of course, 3 very important questions to answer in only 5 minutes, but I would like to first to insist on current challenges we are facing in Paris and not in general, because we have many specific situations at the present time. The first aspect I would like to mention is our vision to increase the presence of middle class and family presence in the city to foster a real social mix. And we know it's a huge challenge for all big cities in the world. The second aspect I would like to mention is the question of migration and to try to offer a decent shelter to migrants in collaboration, of course, with the French government and to help implementing specific policies to welcome refugees and migrants. And I know we have worked a lot with Berlin on these aspects and in general with German cities. The third aspect is to be sure to ensure the Paris position as a key player in the fields of ecological transition and adaptation to climate change. Of course, it's regarding the subject of climate change, of air pollution. It's one of the main aspects we are facing. And probably the last point I would like to mention is to try to give to Parisians the opportunity to promote digitally connected urban development. It's very important to reinforce citizenship in big cities and, of course, in society in general. For the second question regarding major issues Paris is tackling in achieving a more circular economy, I would like to mention two aspects. Of course, and probably the most important is the change of behaviors. How we can to change behaviors which preserves natural resources and which can improve and stimulate a change in practices for everyone, for of course each citizen, for the private sector, for public organization, etc. And as an economical model, circular economy is a set of solutions. And the second important aspect of major issues is the question of the structuring of sectors. Because circular economy is directly linked to waste reduction. So, of course, we need to structure sectors to achieve this point. And to mention some good practices in Paris, I don't have the time to develop all aspects, but probably I would like to mention two examples of what we have done in Paris. The first one is linked to public procurement. Public procurement represents almost $2 billion a year in Paris for the city of Paris. I'm in charge of finance and budget in Paris. And public procurement is a good way to structure the sectors connected to circular economy and waste recovery. Why? Because we have developed and adopted in 2016 a sustainable public procurement scheme in Paris. And so far, 43% of today's markets based in the city financial department offer circular economy elements, and 68 of markets have included an environmental clause or criteria. And the second example I would like to mention is the diagnosis of all streams of incoming and outgoing flows we have built on our territory. Just, in fact, to describe the urban metabolism. This tool is very essential to design an action plan for any sector according to its flows. It's both incoming materials, outgoing wastes in the construction branch, and the same for the food and manufactured goods, like, for example, textile in Paris.
Thank you very much. You have touched on very broad range of issues from migration and digital economy and urban metabolism and so on and so forth. Thank you very much. Can we go to the South Africa and Durban?
Thank you.
Tell us about your city. Yeah.
Durban is quite a very dynamic city. About 60% of it is rural. And within the urban areas, we have various pockets of informal settlements. And those informal settlements mean that there is no formal management in terms of waste, meaning that waste collection is quite minimal, and that creates a big of a problem for us as a city. It creates a threat to our water resources, especially because most of these informal settlements are within water resources, riverines and streams. And when waste is dumped within those streams, it accumulates, and when it rains, it clogs the systems, and Mother Nature plays its part and say that I am not happy, and flooding is exacerbated. And maybe if you've heard in the news recently, we had fatalities due to flooding, and one of the biggest contributors in terms of these flooding is waste in the river systems. So in terms of changing the behavior, it's one of the challenges in terms of educating people in terms of how do they relate to waste issues, how do they minimize, how do they see the value in terms of waste. In terms of the programs that are being initiated by the city, it's more of quite dominated by the private sector. So even though the communities try to be involved, it's not attractive. They don't see value, they don't see gold in waste management, because we want to promote that valuable economic chain, but because of the long distances and the long chain in terms of the market, so the income is very low and it becomes very unattractive. And in terms of the city trying to support in terms of infrastructure, the infrastructure is quite poor, and the city is now trying to expand and renovate those infrastructure to ensure that we increase the opportunities in terms of the circular waste, and we shorten the chain in terms of income. So basically what it means in terms of Durban is that the massive challenge is that we have a lot of waste, but less waste that we are taking into the circular economy to reduce the amount of waste that we put in terms of our landfill sites.
Thank you. And okay, so now I'd like to ask Berlin, Mayor, to tell us about your city and challenges and achievement.
Thank you for questions, but I would like to answer in German, but we have an interpreter and translation in English. Wir haben in Berlin, ähnlich wie wir das eben auch gehört haben, natürlich auch viele Aufgaben zu bewältigen, und die größte Aufgabe liegt
in Berlin. We have a lot of functions and tasks. We need to organize the processes of growth in our city. 40,000 people per year come to our city every year. We need an urban infrastructure that takes into account this development. We always need new apartments, parks, schools. In the next 6 to 7 years, we will need a relatively large number of new schools, but also in climate policy and environmental policy. We have to deal with pollutants because of the growing number of cars in the city. In large cities in Germany, we have standards standards and targets, caps, in order to reduce the pollution produced by cars. We need technological solutions that industry cannot always provide us with. We need to control the traffic. We have to reduce the pollution, air pollution, and with regard to circular economy, with the growth of our population, we also have a growing amount of waste and also, unfortunately, littering of public spaces. We are organized in a very decentralized way. We have boroughs in which littering play an important role, and we need to have solutions, offers. We need to strengthen and broaden our network of recycling centers where people can dispose of their waste beyond their own household, so that there are no refrigerators or furniture being dumped somewhere. We have a very strong waste separation system in Berlin, and through this system we want to reduce our residual waste until 2030. We want to reduce by another further 20% our residual waste through a strong central system. For that, we also need waste management advice, and we also need to have a lot of promotional activities. One big issue is biological waste. We have the high-density urban area where about 90% of the households are provided with a bio-waste collection system. But if you look at the whole urban area, we are only at 50%, and we want to raise this percentage to 80%. We want to further target biological waste. It's not easy to have a perfect system in place. There needs to be acceptance on the part of the city, of the population, and I want to also give some positive examples. The Better World Cup campaign is one of them, where we try to reduce the number of disposable cups, the coffee-to-go disposable cups. We have about 900 partners in Berlin, supermarkets, bakeries, and other shopping points of sale where you can go with your own cup and you get coffee into your own cup, and you get a little rebate, a little discount for coming with your own cup. And we have managed to reduce the number of disposable cups substantially that create a big problem of recycling. We have around 900 such places where you can come with your own cup. We want to double the number of places. We want a system that encourages people, that creates awareness among the population, and that makes people aware that each and every one of us can contribute to the reduction of waste. And one last sentence. A great success has been reached by us by having a uniform bin for recoverable materials, materials that are interesting for industry, for example, metals. There was no true competition among companies, but there was an agreement among industry to have a uniform bin for recoverable materials. This was well accepted by the population. It was easy to manage, for example, there was a bin for recoverable materials, for example, for metals, and that has allowed us to collect a substantial amount of recoverable material that can be used, and I think this is a very good example.
Thank you very much. We have heard presentation from 4 cities. And 4 cities are all mega cities, and Mexico is still urbanizing and growing first, and Durban as well. And Paris and Berlin are, I thought, already kind of matured and city, but still your cities look like growing. And Paris explained about the issue of migrants and refugees. And also, their range, I mean, their issues are different, but there are also commonalities. And so, and all cities have tackling the issue of waste management, waste separation, and recycling at different levels, at home, household level to the city level, and district or neighborhood level. We have saved time, and I think we have more time for the second round. So I like to go for the second round, which I start with questions to cities, and you can speak probably more than 3 minutes, 4 minutes each. And my second question is twofold. First is what are priorities and action points for your city to advance circular economy, and what are suggestions you want to make, not only to yourself, but to other cities, to the world? These two questions. And I'd like to ask Berlin, Mr. Mura, start, and we go this way, the other way around. Start from Berlin.
Ja, vielen Dank. Ich kann da gleich.
Thank you very much, and I would like to connect to what I said before. With all the positive aspects, we still have a lot to do. I think the colleague from Paris already said that we have a lot of possibilities of influence through our own investments and our own expenditure. Berlin contributes between 4 to 5 billion euros per year in investments. That is a big amount of money, which is interesting for our industry, but we can also make demands and we can formulate requirements and rules, what we want to do with our money, with our investment, and what are the prerequisites and requirements. And that has a lot of impact on our procurement system. When we spend money, we want to make sure, for example, in major events, during celebrations, we can decide how we use, for example, dishes and cutlery. We, for example, can make sure that no longer disposable cutlery and dishes are being used. So our public procurement system gives us a lot of means and possibilities to have influence, to have impact, and to also draw the attention on certain areas. And also in our contracts with the industry, we can make demands, we can set the conditions, and I also think that in regulation too, we can become more active, not only in Germany, but in the EU-wide. We can have a strong framework of rules and regulation and forbid plastic products, for example. I remember a few years ago, some years ago, there was a lot of discussion about those sprays that emit gases. We have been strong. We have made our point. New technological solutions have been found. We were able to change the game, and I think we need to formulate, to phrase and define our own conditions, which will allow change of behavior and of thinking, and as well as in the population as in the industry. We we also need to do information, awareness building. In Berlin, there are places, we call them waste watchers. We also modeled that a bit on the experience in Vienna. There are people and places, people who watch where things are being done in a way that are undesirable, where there are things being done with waste that are not acceptable, that people are encouraged to deal in a different way with waste, places where people can also go and find advice and solutions. There are so-called environmental pedagogues, educators that already in schools create awareness among children to show them that everybody has a responsibility to share. And this offer of education and advice is very important for the future.
Thank you very much. Quite impressive. I mean, you talked about education and behavior change. That also other speakers also touched on before. So now I'd like to ask Darban and to, share your, way forward and the suggestions.
I think all the cities building up on the education and awareness. I think the city should bring in the communities closer. We need to be inclusive in terms of how we engage in the issues of waste management. In this way, when I say community engagement, everything needs to be like community-based, maybe school-based, where we have buyback centers within the school, the small buyback centers within the school, while we're entrenching the education, but there must be some sort of practicing from what we are teaching or from that awareness that we are doing. And obviously, I think partnering with the private sector is important. I think we live in a very fast, convenient lifestyle where everything, it's all about convenience. And that very same convenience for us creates problems while we're thinking that it's convenient and comfortable for us. For example, we need to engage into the issues of plastic packaging. Why do the double packaging? Why not a single packaging? Because it creates more waste. So we need to engage the private sector. And obviously, we cannot, as cities alone, be in control in terms of what the industry is doing. We will need support in terms of legislation from the national government in partnering with us in terms of regulating all these issues, in terms of how much production of plastic is happening within our cities, all those regulations in terms of the packaging to minimize waste. And obviously, a lot of investment needs to go towards infrastructure development and upscaling of that infrastructure to enable the circular economy to be attractive and to expand. I think in our observation as well, it's that it's more likely the private sector who are regulating the circular economy, such that the cities are just monitoring on the side. I think the cities need to take a little bit step forward and to take a lead in ensuring that everybody is integrated into the system. Even the informal beneficiaries or the actors are integrated into this industry, and the cities need to play a role in terms of supporting those informal players into ensuring that the industry grows. And obviously, without a separation of waste from source in our household, I think we are setting ourselves huge financial costs if we do not promote the separation of waste from source, meaning that each and every one, in terms of being citizens, in terms of being the private sector, in terms of being the city on its own, we need to step up in terms of separating waste from source, because at the moment it's only about 30% of waste that is separated from source. So I think we need to step up in that part of circular waste and ensure that we maximize the outcomes in terms of the circular economy.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, you have, touched on the roles of course, communities and people, but also you stress the importance of a partnership with the private sector and involvement with industries, how to regulate and how to, probably enforce or encourage them to do more kind of circular economy, purposes. Okay, now I'd like to ask Paris about your, action points or suggestions.
Yes. First, I would like to mention that a circular economy plan has been adopted in Paris in December 2017, because it was one of the main objectives of the mandate of the mayor Anne Hidalgo. And this plan covers the period 2017 to 2020. And it represents 15 specific actions which are based on 5 pillars that I would like to mention first. The first one, of course, is how to use planning and construction to promote circular economy. The second one is the triptych, how to reduce, reuse, and repair. Very important to structure a specific strategy on this point. The third one is how to promote support for actors and to build specific tools for this aspect. The fourth that I mentioned previously is public procurement. It's, of course, for all of us, one of the main tools to promote circular economy. And the last one is responsible consumption. But I would like, in detail, mention probably 3 priorities or action points for circular economy in Paris, because most of them depend on our direct action from cities. The first one is to create and how to create a urban network of recycling sites. In fact, it's to create the backbone, the city backbone for circular economy strategy. It means creating recycling centers, workshops, etc. The second priority I would like to mention, to emphasize, is how to eliminate disposable plastics and reducing the plastic consumption. It's probably one of the most important and efficient way to promote circular economy. And it will be probably one of the main major strategic objectives of the Olympic Games in Paris in 2024, to work on the inheritage, and probably the idea to erase totally plastic will be one of them. And the last one, because it probably the most important environmental impact, is how to develop circular economy in the construction branch, which represents almost 1/3 of the environmental impact of cities. And the last point, to accelerate the transition to a circular economy, I would like to formulate 4 suggestions to accelerate this transition. The first one is that Today, especially in France, but not only in Europe, in many other countries, local authorities are constrained by the legal context. So it's very important to collaborate with the state level to adapt the legal system to change the practice in, for example, the industrial sector, which not depend of our action. Second point, of course, is the question of public awareness and communication to have a strong impact on the territory. The fourth suggestion I would like to make is specific to the European country, is how European institutions could and that they need to send a strong message to incentive industrials to change their production processes, which are not really, for the moment, dedicated to circular economy. It's an euphemism. And the last point I would like to mention is how at a local level, local authorities can promote education and courses in connection with circular economy, both for children in schools, both for children, for our public agents, just to insist on the fact that education is probably the most important question to change behavior. But just to have an expression of hope, we have the feeling in France, in Paris, that behaviors are changing very, very fast, and that our inhabitants are really involved now and in demand of more circular economy. And in fact, all strategy and tools that help to reduce the environmental impact of our model, of our consumption model.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing Paris approach. I mean, it is very comprehensive to circular economy. And talking about Olympic Games, Tokyo is hosting Olympic Games, as Governor Koike already mentioned, and they are trying to make it environmentally, sustainable, and also, and also make it a kind of universal design concept, and try to incorporate universal design concept so that the people with a disability and those those people can also have a good access to the Olympic Games and Paralympic Games. And Tokyo governor also initiated action to collect unused mobile phones. You know that? To collect rare metals from that and make it gold metal or silver metal or bronze metal or whatever. So they are still doing it. So if you have any unused smartphone, please donate to Tokyo Metropolitan Government. Okay, so lastly, I'd like to ask Mexico City to talk about your action points or priorities and any suggestions you want to make.
We have a very long development program that incorporates many of the issues that we are concerned about here. But I will just share some of the actions that we are taking now rather than what we are planning to do in the next few years. We just introduced legislation, and actually was passed just a couple of weeks ago, to have Mexico City be free of single-use plastics by the year 2021. So this is a major piece of legislation that we think is feasible, and we're incorporating this idea of zero waste in all possible ways. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a large 2-3 days music festival in a large park in Mexico with attendance of, over the 3 days, about 500,000 people. It was a zero waste festival where everything was recycled and so on. So we're incorporating this idea of zero waste and no single-use plastics all along the activities that we are doing. There is a very large project to create the first what we call solar city within the city, within Mexico City, using solar energy in high demand centers. We are starting by a place that we call Centro de Abastos, which is a huge distribution center, food distribution center mainly, where 100% of the demand of electricity will be covered by around 1,000 solar panels in that area. But we are also introducing solar energy in a very large part of small-scale manufacturing companies that are especially those that are using traditional fuels. We have right now a large procurement process going on to incorporate, to create the first large recycling of construction materials, talking about how polluting those are. Around 30% of the land, the area of Mexico City is rural. A lot of that is most of that is what we call conservation land, which is green areas. And that is being suffocated by illegal disposing of construction materials. So we're making a big effort to recover those and be able to recycle them. We have policies to foster the transition to electric and hybrid vehicles. To strengthen public transportation, we have large projects of public transportation, electric public transportation, and to reduce travel time. This for us is key. I just said we just went through 5 days of environmental emergency because of high levels of pollution. So for us, reducing emissions from transportation is very critical. And we are implementing something around 3,000 rainwater harvesting systems in order to deal with lack of water, regular availability of water, especially in areas that have precarious systems of water distribution. So these are some of the actions that we are taking as we speak that we think will improve the way we use natural resources in Mexico and dealing with some of the most stressing issues in the city, namely water and pollution from transportation. Obviously, the efforts that are being made by the city government are not enough. We are very much aware that we need investment, private investment, to come and complement a lot of the things that we are doing. So there is a great effort from government to provide a credible environment, a stable and credible environment for private investment within this concept of circular economy. And I am not going to miss my opportunity to advocate for an increase in international financial resources to legitimate priorities identified by cities, especially within this concept of circular economy. The resources that are going nowadays, international resources that are going nowadays to cities are dwarf with respect to the needs and credible projects that the cities are undertaking.
Thank you very much. We have heard the efforts the four cities are making, and there are, of course, commonalities and similarities, but approaches are also different. So that's why we need to continue sharing experiences and ideas. And this session has been great for that objective, but this needs to be further expanded and to further enhance sharing with other cities through various occasions. From representing UN Habitat, I like also invite all mayors and governors to World Urban Forum, which will be held in Abu Dhabi in February. That's a premier and the world's biggest conference on discuss about urban issues. So please plan and come to Abu Dhabi in February. We have already spent more than time we have allocated. So with that, I'd like to conclude this session. Thank you very much for first of all, our panelists sharing your experience and knowledge and ideas. It's very useful and fruitful. And thank you very much for audience for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So all panelists and the moderator, please come to the center of the stage. We'd like to take photo together.
Photo. Center.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mueller, Ms. Damar, Mr. Gregoire, Dr. Gonzalez, and Mr. Koresawa. Thank you very much.